want to welcome everyone. My name is Kathleen Fairfax. I'm the Vice Provost for International Affairs, and this is our town hall on education abroad. So a lot has happened, obviously, in the world, and it certainly has affected education abroad. And we know that people have questions, and we also wanted to have a chance to provide updates to our campus partners and other interested people about education abroad. I'll just give a few logistical details and then turn it over to the team that's going to be presenting. So they have some kind of facts and figures to share with you that won't take that long, no more than 20 to 30 minutes. And then we'll just open it up for Q&A for whatever questions you all might have. If during the presentation you have questions as well, so you don't want to forget them, put them in the chat. And we have someone monitoring the chat, and we'll be collecting those questions in the chat format, and we'll go through them once we finish with the presentation. So feel free to use the chat to ask further questions, and we'll take it from there. So I wanted to turn this over to Laura Thorns, our Director of Education Abroad, and Laura will introduce her team and we'll get our presentation started.
Great. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Very nice to see a good turnout today. We have a lot to cover, and we've organized a presentation, so you also have some visuals and other information as we're talking. I'm joined today by some other colleagues. Maybe I'll have them just start by quickly introducing themselves so you recognize a name with a face as we are going through the presentation. So as I said, I'm Laura Thorns, and I'm the Director of Education Abroad. Derek?
Hello, everyone. My name is Derek Smallwood. I am our International Risk Manager. It's great to see you all. Thank you for coming today.
It's nice to see so many familiar faces. I'm Kim Kita, Director of CSU Todos Santos.
Great. And then Bob Kling is also going to be giving a little update about semester at sea. Bob, quick introduction, quick hello. Oh, you're on mute.
Bob Kling, Department of Economics and Senior Academic Officer for the CSU Semester at Sea Partnership.
Great. Okay. Thank you all. Then I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and we'll jump in with a little bit of historical information as well as how we're making decisions and what the future of education abroad will look like generally around the world, as well as what's happening with Todos Santos and Semester at Sea. Okay, great. And if everyone can see this, and I should be good. Recording is going. So yeah, just to start, Derek and I are going to give an overview of what's been happening recently and how we've been making some decisions in the past as well as in the future. So as you'll see, theoretically, so this spring was a pretty hard spring. Starting actually at the end of January, we started to have to ask students to return because there were a lot of outbreaks related to coronavirus. Biggest impacts happened in March. For most of the month of March, we asked a total of 320 students to return from abroad. There were a handful of students opted to stay abroad. There were about 340 in total that had been abroad. 320 did return. And some of the biggest concerns we had obviously had to do with the spread of the virus and not wanting our students to get in harm's way. Equally important at that time was a lot of countries were shutting down their borders and restricting all mobility inbound and sometimes outbound. What we didn't want was our students being pausing and maybe not returning to the US only to be stuck in another country without their regular support structures for an unspecified amount of time. And as it's played out, there were a lot of countries that had very restricted mobility for months. So a handful of students that have stayed abroad, most of them have returned with time. The greatest number were in New Zealand, which was a relatively safe place to be, but obviously in order for them to be safe, they needed to restrict their mobility. So like I say, students came home. We were able to get them into online courses. Most of them took online courses through their host institution so that they could stay on track to graduate. The students who were not able to get into online courses that they were already enrolled in were able to take courses through CSU Global. So as far as we know, based on at least students reaching out to us, we were able to connect students with courses. We did hear some feedback from students that not everyone was happy with the online formats, as I'm sure we heard across campus here as well. So I wouldn't say that everyone successfully completed courses, but they did have the opportunity to complete their courses from abroad or through CSU Global. So that's good news. And by now they should all be done with their spring coursework. For summer, we had to make a very hard decision, basically in March and April, to cancel all of the summer programs that we had already had scheduled. So that affected about 800 students and over 50 faculty-led programs or group-led programs that were going all around the world. Just with time, we noticed that obviously there were so many restrictions here in the US, and those restrictions did not stop. And still many countries are still on very, very limited mobility. So that was definitely the right decision, very heartbreaking because we had some wonderful programs planned. We had a lot of students that this was maybe the last opportunity for them to go abroad. At the same time, we couldn't guarantee they would get over there and be able to even leave their apartments, let alone have the experience they were expecting to have. And then looking into fall, we also had to make the hard choice to restrict fall travel abroad. For the most part, all the semester length programs were canceled. Once again, as we got closer, kind of within that 2-month mark of departure, we could see more and more countries were either not going to let any international travelers in, or they weren't going to let US travelers in, or the risk of exposure was so high that once again, it wasn't necessarily in the students' best interest to go. So the last 6 months have been very, very challenging, but I think we're making the right decisions and trying to act in the students' best interest and give them enough planning time so that they could make a plan B if they really needed certain courses to graduate. I wanted to share this through this all. I think this has been the hardest year of my professional life, and what was a real blessing is we always do evaluations no matter the semester, no matter what's going on. And this was a quote from one of our CSU study abroad participants, where I went into it thinking, well, what's a student going to say about the semester? This had to have been horrible for them and a lot of dreams cut short. And yet here's what I saw more often. A lot of students really looked at this whole situation and still had a lot of positive growth outcomes and a lot of positive mindset. So thought I'd share this with you. Okay, Derek, want to tell everyone what's going to go on moving forward?
Hello, everyone. Thanks again for joining us today. So I'm going to talk a little bit about programming moving forward. It's important to document, we've been closely monitoring the health and safety environments throughout this pandemic and are really trying to be as intentional as possible about these decisions, as Laura noted. And right now we feel it's a little bit too early to make blanket decisions about fall break and winter break travel, really evaluating them on a case-by-case basis. Admittedly, a significant portion of travel has already been deferred. That's primarily our staff and faculty-led travel, and then our graduate student travel, which really makes up the greatest portion of travelers during these breaks. However, as we enter fall, I think we'll know more and more about the trajectory of the outbreak in different countries. Let's say border restrictions are being loosened. The itinerary of the program really mitigates some of the risks. Students are aware of best practices and really agree to follow those best practices on these programs. It may be feasible to run some of these short-term programs over these breaks. That said, if it is looking feasible, all risks and approvals will need to be evaluated by our International Travel Oversight Committee, the ITOC. I will address what the ITOC is and some of the considerations we're looking at in a later slide. So that's fall break and winter break. Laura, if you want to go to the next one. Oh, excuse me. So for timelines for those breaks, we're using that same about 2 to 4 month window, so we can let students know with enough time to pivot towards other plans if we're going to be running the programs or not. So for spring 2021, these are a little bit more challenging in that they're lengthier programs. There's a lot more independent student travel. A lot of them aren't directly overseen by CSU. So this is going to be a little more challenging here. I also think that at this point, some countries will have a greater control over the outbreak and more robust infrastructure in place to handle second, third, or fourth waves, whatever we may be at that time. So it'll still be on a case-by-case basis. Some countries may still be severely restricted. Some countries may not be open to international travelers. So while I'm hopeful, we'll be making decisions as we get closer to the start of the spring semester, again, using that 2 to 4 month window so students can be informed of our plans, and certainly before they need to enroll in spring coursework here on campus. So still case by case, but I am hopeful here. And then for summer, I think by this point, I'm optimistic that we'll find that elusive new normal. I do think that students traveling abroad, that the experience will look different than it has in previous summers, but there will be that opportunity to have that impactful education abroad experience that we really want for them to have. It just may look a little bit different, but I still think those learning outcomes can be achieved. So that's the plan for these upcoming semesters, again, using that 2 to 4 month window for all of them to make assessments about the viability of these programs running. Next one more. So I mentioned the International Travel Oversight Committee, that's the ITOC. So this is an advisory group that evaluates all higher risk travel. That could be destination risk, programmatic risk, or both. We have been, the ITOC has been on campus since 2014, and we meet bi-weekly. In a typical year, we evaluate about 17% of our international travelers are participating on programs that have been looked at by ITOC. So we do have a pretty large impact on our international traveling community. We have membership from Student Affairs, Support and Safety, General Counsel, BOVPR, Education Abroad, and then Risk Management and Insurance. So a wide variety of different participants. And really, in a nutshell, the intention of this group is to ask critical questions to make sure that all participants are aware of the risks present in these programs and have good ways to mitigate those risks. As a result of as a result of COVID, in the current designations from the State Department and CDC, which are two organizations that we really rely on heavily to assess risk, really the entire world would be the entire risk at this point. So the ITOC will be involved with any travel approvals for the foreseeable future. In the interim, this committee is also playing a significant role in working with program leaders and working with our faculty-led programs to help mitigate risks and identify gaps to determine and help mitigate those risks if these programs are able to run. So we're really doing a lot over these past couple months. You can go to the next slide, Laura. So I think that when we're looking at some of the considerations that ITOC is addressing, I think it's helpful to place them into these different buckets. And really what I think the way we're approaching it is that there are some risks that we can control, and the risks that we can't control, we just need to educate about. So control the risks we can control and educate about everything else. And I've broken them into these different kind of areas to help us do so. So with travel restrictions, this one is pretty basic. If borders are closed, if there's arrival quarantine, if arrivals to a certain country need to be self-isolate for 2 weeks on arrival, that's really just going to negate a lot of these short-term programs from running. So really just looking at what the restrictions may be on entering into a specific country. In terms of institutional guidance, that is both CSU travel policy, what is CSU's travel policy, what our peer institutions are doing, and as well as guidance from government agencies like the State Department, like the CDC, as well as agencies abroad. So a lot of different institutional guidance we're looking at. With healthcare, really here we're looking at the health infrastructure of all these different countries, the availability of hospital beds, the prevalence of PPE and the availability of PPE to travelers, and really just also looking at the trajectory of the outbreak in that country, both how they handled that first wave and how they have positioned themselves to handle future waves as well. With personal considerations, this is really kind of moving more into that education components. If students need to be made aware that's pre-existing conditions that could put them at greater risk with COVID. Students need to be comfortable with traveling in this kind of age of uncertainty. And they really need to talk through these personal considerations with their emergency contacts. So really here, this is a lot of that educational component. With program design, every program is different. When we're thinking about some of those short-term programs that are coming up soon, We do have a lot of control over those itineraries. Some of them are quite remote, more fieldwork based. And then compare that to a semester-long program that the entire intention of the program is community engagement. Again, these considerations are going to look very different depending on which program we're looking at. And some of them which may be more feasible than others. Some of these programs, we have a lot of control over the transportation, the accommodations, the food. So we really can do a lot to manage exposure in some of these programs, but not all of them. And then finally, conditions on the ground. And this, again, is moving more into that education piece. I think that students need to think about what the experience would look like day to day and just be prepared for that. Some museums still may be closed, some community engagement activities may be limited. I think it's just really important to make sure that students have realistic expectations of what these experiences will look like, especially as we kind of emerge from this first wave of this pandemic until we're fully out of it, which I hope we will be out soon. So those are just some of those considerations we're looking at. Again, there's a plethora of different things that go into these different buckets, but I thought it'd be helpful to identify it this way. Kim, if you want to address the next slide.
Yeah, hi everyone. We wanted to also share some updates from the CSU Todos Santos Center. Next slide, Laura, please. So the good news in terms of, if there is good news in terms of how things unfolded in spring, is that we were able to finish the first half of the spring 2020 programs. And of particular note is being able to fully conclude the Fish, Wildlife, and Conservation Biology semester program, which typically ends right before spring break. The center then closed to participants in mid-March, and Baja California Sur issued its stay-at-home orders, which have been quite similar to the US. They issued them in late March and early April. The center team and their families are all doing well. I know a lot of you have developed relationships over the years with our staff, so I wanted to be sure to share that. Staff have all been working from home primarily, the administrative team, and as the economy and the society starts to reopen, the admin team is working 1 or 2 days a week at the center. So we're focusing on one admin person at a time, as well as a facility person around the clock to provide the necessary security, maintenance, and oversight. So we've really taken advantage of this stay-at-home culture since March to be able to focus on increased collaboration with community partners. Specifically, we've been supporting food security for citizens in the community and will continue to be active in that endeavor through October. We've also been continuing with English and Spanish language programming by moving those classes online. As mentioned before, assuring the maintenance and security of the center, and then finally planning for reopening. So just to mention that the food security work in particular has really strengthened community partnerships, as well as helping to address the immediate needs for food in the community, both of which really directly support future student engagement at the point at which we're able to reopen. Next slide, Laura. So I wanted to share a little bit about Mexico's system for reopening. It's a little bit different than the US. And because of the nature of the Todos Santos Center, we're always looking at what's happening in the US, what decisions are being made at CSU, Fort Collins campus in particular, and then also what are we learning from the Mexican government and what regulations do we need to abide by when we do reopen. So Baja California Sur is currently at a level 5, which is orange, hopefully on its way towards the green, although of course we don't know the exact timeline of that. So some businesses started to reopen with reduced occupancy in early July. And the center will be able to resume programs, again, once we're permitted by the Mexican government, as well as having the go-ahead from CSU. A new thing that we will need to do, we'll need to implement best practices and meet strictest of requirements, again, as set forth both by CSU and by Mexican law. So there's a new certification process from the Mexican Sanitation Agency, and we'll have to go through the steps to become certified in order to reopen. So what we think will happen possibly in early fall is that the local English classes that we offer are probably the most likely to be able to resume in-person meetings, again with social distancing, with masks, and with revised occupancy of all of our classroom spaces. As well, for the fall, we still have one short-term program pending for November. And all other fall 2020 programs have either been rescheduled to the spring or canceled for this year. Next slide, Laura. So we're scheduled with a full calendar of programs beginning in January of 2021. So in the next couple months, as Derek mentioned, with this window until we have to make decisions about January programs, we'll be keeping a close eye on the experiences at the Fort Collins campus so that we can adapt our center plans as new information emerges. We have a pretty detailed planning document, and we've spent a lot of time focusing on and preparing for the reopening of the center. So really, the center itself is ready. The team is ready. They can't wait for students and faculty to come back. And we really hope that that can happen. We're just not quite sure what the timeline will be. We hope it might be able to happen in spring of 2021.
Thank you, Kim. Bob, would you like to give just a quick overview of what's been happening with the semester at sea voyages, past and future?
Yes, you bet. And I don't have detailed slides, but I'll just give that quick overview. So the first thing is, I guess, good news is that as of June, CSU and the Institute for Shipboard Education have entered into their new 5-year affiliation agreement. So the first one was 2015 to 2020, and the second one has just started now, and that's all good news. As far as voyages, let's see, I guess perhaps a lot of people here know what has happened to the spring 20 and fall 20 voyages. The spring 20 voyage ended about 4 weeks and 3 ports early, with everyone going home from South Africa and finishing courses remotely, just as everyone was doing on campuses. I think most participants thought it was a super valuable experience, even though it was possibly one of the weirdest voyages ever. And students, lots of faculty want to repeat, and we're going to allow them to repeat earlier if they apply and are accepted earlier than we might otherwise. Students were given partial refunds for the voyage, for the actual room, board, and passage part that they didn't complete, but not for tuition because they did get to complete their courses. Students were given vouchers to apply to future voyages if they wanted, so that they could perhaps have better access at having the experience that is more normal on semester at sea. The fall 20 voyage ultimately was canceled. We made that decision in May, so that was almost 4 months in advance of embarkation. Lots of those students have applied to transfer to spring 21, fall 21, or whatever future voyages. Spring 21, we're proceeding with planning as if it's going to happen. Completely new itinerary, and so on and so forth. But obviously there are big uncertainties. And even though we're working hard to be in close communication with what's going on in the cruise industry, where we meet or exceed all of those standards, the biggest problem probably is, even if we could make a voyage happen using best practices, most of our voyagers are Americans who wouldn't be allowed into so many countries that it might make that voyage impractical. We've committed to making a decision about that voyage by mid August or so. So again, about 4 months in advance of what would be embarkation. We're assuming that by fall 21, things will be normal enough. I mean, we're anticipating changes in how we do things, perhaps field trips, field classes, safety measures on board and so on, but we're expecting what we hope will be a more or less a normal voyage in fall 21. We have a working group that involves multiple stakeholders, led by ISE's Vice President for Operations and Risk Management, Bruce Middleton. They are reviewing, considering all the issues in order to figure out how to go forward, if not for spring, then afterward. We are renegotiating things with the ship owners to see how to make things work, and whether or not the spring voyage happens, you know, things will go forward, although it's a time of pretty severe economic hardship for the Institute. I guess I'll stop there and be ready to answer questions when the time comes.
Thank you, Bob. We know that many of you are very invested in students and their well-being and their academic outcomes. So we just wanted to give you maybe a few takeaways of what we all can do maybe to help students navigate these uncertain times. Here to some thoughts. Let me make sure. I just need to move. Oh goodness. There we go. I just need to move my bar so I can read everything. So as you know, as students are interested in international education, there's a lot of ways they can still learn, you know, even if they can't go abroad. We realize a lot of students, this was something they were looking forward to for years, and we certainly would like them to have this opportunity. And we also recognize the world's in a very precarious new place. And like I say, we do want to watch out for our students' best interest and make sure they don't get sick, but we also want to watch out for the world's best interest. A lot of traveling right now is not necessarily what we need to be doing as CSU ambassadors, but there are a lot of ways for students to get engaged internationally. So as we know, there are, you know, hundreds of courses that have an internationally themed outcomes and course content. Highly recommend students look into those courses. Sometimes we devalue what you can learn in a classroom in the US, and yet we have many, many internationally acclaimed researchers and faculty members talking about things that everyone should be aware of. There's also a lot of virtual programming, maybe eventually some in-person programming, but definitely for the coming year, most of it will probably be virtual programming for international students. Most of these are also open and welcome to domestic students. So if they want to engage with international students, just look at our CSU website, the International Programs website, and you can get a sense of all the different programming that's happening for all of our students. And then a new area that is growing rapidly are virtual internships as well as virtual courses abroad. This is not something that our field is historically engaged with a lot, and yet how relevant is that right now? So we have had some students express interest in doing an internship. As we are all working remotely, they can also do an international internship in a US location. So they can be engaging with international stakeholders, different companies, educational facilities, what have you, but doing that in the comfort and safety of their own homes. Same with courses. You know, there are a lot of organizations that are offering virtual courses. So instead of maybe, you know, doing all of their coursework through CSU, or maybe if they want to take a winter break course or a summer course, these are being offered virtually as well. So students can kind of round out their perspectives on the curriculum they're learning with an international cohort of students. As always, This, like I said, this has been challenging. When you believe so much in what you're doing, and I do, and my team does, we really want to bring young people together, mix them up, show them what the rest of the world looks like, what they think about, and then bring them back home and hopefully help them to educate a broader population about what they learned, these new perspectives they've gained. So to not be able to do that is challenging. And at the same time, once again, here's another spring 2020 student saying, that's not going to stop me from believing and being curious and wanting to learn more about other people. So that's what anchors me through these uncertain times, and I just want to share. So that was the end of our formal presentation. I think Diana has been organizing all the questions and is going to direct those at us so we can make sure we answer your questions. If you still have ongoing questions, please put those in the chat so we can add them to the conversation.
Laura, wasn't there one slide that you about students who think they do want to go abroad and what advice to give them? That one got skipped over.
Oh, we did.
That one. Yes.
Pardon. Yeah, excuse me. I did zip through. I was thinking it was so efficient. So, yeah. So if you do, thank you. If you do have any students that are still hoping to go abroad in these uncertain times, like I say, we are going to continue to monitor things. Quite honestly, it's going to be complicated. We expect a vaccine is coming, but I think we all know that this is something we're going to live with for a long time. So just having a vaccine doesn't automatically make everyone around the world safe for travel. So as we're evaluating this, we are sharing this information with students and will continue. And this is also advice you can share as you're meeting with different students. For spring and winter break travelers, we are asking them to hold off on buying non-refundable airfare or get refundable tickets. Definitely, I think, as Derek mentioned, students really need to think about their own risk tolerance. And like I say, some of the comfort levels with uncertainty. As we found out from spring, within a week, we had students going from, I'm going to be here for the end of the semester to, time to come home, and you need to come home within the week. So that can happen again, even potentially in the spring term. So just to continue to be flexible. Definitely, we want them looking into any withdrawal costs for programs, as well as the housing costs of wherever they're going to be going, and make sure that they make decisions, even if we haven't made a final decision, that they're making their own decisions about how much are they willing to put down for this experience if we do need to change our plan of action later. And we are going to notify students, like I say, in that 2 to 4 month window, as Derek mentioned. So there is still some time to make backup plans, but we're trying to make sure that they don't lose any money through this uncertainty. Obviously, as they're making a plan for abroad, they also need to be thinking about what's happening on campus. So thinking about what their housing plan is for here in the U.S., as well as whatever courses they might need to stay on track to graduate, and maybe double registering for both of those. And obviously all of this still overlaps with the non-refundable deposits. That can be for housing, that can be for program fees, that can be for airfare. If they can just hold off and obviously contact our team and let us know if they have any pending timelines that they're working under, and we can give a more honest assessment of where we're at right now. As we've been benchmarking with our partner universities across the US and around the world, most universities are not making a go, no-go plan at this point, but more of a cautiously optimistic. We didn't think 4 months ago we'd be where we are now. 6 months seems like a long way off. At the same time, we know that there's no guarantees. So we want to leave the door open, but we'll try to be as honest as possible. We also recognize some people have very vested interest in going abroad, and we'll, we're always willing to have that conversation and see if there's any way to make this work on an individual level. But institutionally, we will make some bigger decisions just based on the information we have and all the resources we're looking at. Okay, so with that, now we'll go to the end and start with questions.
Sure. So hi, everybody. This is Diana. Claire from engineering asks, I heard the Education Abroad Fair was going remote this year. Can we hear something about that?
Certainly. Maybe I'll mention, yes, we are definitely going virtual. We did not want to have a large fair in early September with potentially 1,000 students mixing and mingling. So we will be offering basically it's 4-day fair. There'll be different workshops throughout the days, and there'll be special information sessions related to different programs. And Claire, since you're so heavily engaged, especially with our partnership in Swansea, we can make sure our UK advisor touches base with you just to let you know when that is, as well as pick your brain a little bit about things to highlight. So that will be the first week of September 1st through the 4th. And more information will be coming quite soon. So you can mark your calendars and inform your students.
Deb asks, where can a student go to find virtual internships and courses?
Okay. Virtual internships. So actually, probably the best person to talk to would be my colleague, Sarah O'Donnell. Maybe Sarah, you can just turn on your computer, give a quick wave. So Sarah O'Donnell oversees all of our internships and service learning programs that we offer with our partnerships. And so if they want to reach out to her, or they can reach out to any of us and we can connect them with Sarah so that they can learn more about the virtual internships options. Anything else to add, Sarah?
No, not especially. Happy to connect with students, and I can provide specific resources if anyone needs them.
Okay. Good. Next question.
So we have a question from Antonio. Can you please let us know if faculty or admins in any of the 3 venues presented, Semester at Sea, Todos, Santos, and Education Abroad, have been furloughed or renegotiated with lower salaries? That would put those members in uneven ground with their colleagues at CSU.
So kind of different programs. So maybe I'll start just by talking about with our faculty-led programs. So I would definitely encourage any faculty members who maybe have done a trade for teaching versus supplemental pay to reach out to us so that we can talk a little bit more about your program and what to expect. Most of our faculty travel on supplemental pay, so they shouldn't be losing their regular salary, but it all depends on what kind of agreement they've negotiated with their department. And in those cases, there are several people that would be affected, and we can talk through it and come up with the best solution so that you're not losing salary you depend on. But I know our situation's a little bit different with Semester at Sea, so maybe Bob, you want to add a little bit to that?
Well, sure. So we have more or less 2 categories of employees: voyage employees, and then the office employees at the Institute for Shipboard Education. So when the fall voyage was canceled, I don't know what you'd call it, but yeah, faculty and staff for the voyage are not sailing. We're not getting paid. There was, I think for faculty members, for instance, $1,000 paid to each person in recognition of their pre-voyage work. And we are working on formulas for how to do that consistently and fairly going forward in case another voyage is canceled. For the folks at ISC, there's been a workforce reduction of about 10 people. That's 6 layoffs plus 4 other departures that were not replaced. That's nearly a 25% workforce reduction. There have not been furloughs. What there have been is temporary compensation reductions, which at this point are expected to extend through November, and they're more or less in the range of a few percent, bigger percentages for higher paid employees. Along with that, I don't know if you want to call this a furlough or not, but except for the senior leadership team, everyone's getting Fridays off. It's not exactly quid pro quo for the reduced compensation, but that's but it's part of a fairness thing. I think that is most of what's been going on there.
Great, thank you, Bob. And if as I heard the question directed very specifically for faculty, if there's more to the question that you'd like an answer on, I'm happy to answer more. But let's go to the next question in the meantime.
Sure, this is more of a suggestion, but maybe Ayelet and others could speak to it. Makela suggests that IP International Programs develops a calendar of events, seminars, and webinars that point to international events and knowledge that we can refer to and have students do likewise, rather than each of us doing this on our own. Ayelet, did you want to maybe start us off with commenting on that? Because I think we have something like that already going on.
Yeah, sure. Well, starting last semester, we did start doing some virtual programming, kind of pretty quick, as everyone else was doing the same. And I think we are hoping to continue a lot of that virtual programming into the fall semester, maybe throughout the year, depending on how event restrictions go on the CSU campus. So you'll definitely hear more from us kind of in the future coming into the fall semester as we're finishing up our planning. We also will put it up on our website. So we do have on the homepage a calendar of events, and all virtual events are also on the CSU virtual events calendar.
I just
Thanks,
want to
Ayelet. Oh, I was just going to say, I think that part of the question from what I heard too was that it sounds like there are some other things going on. And if the calendar of events is one, just to make sure it's as comprehensive as possible so people don't have to go digging for information. So if people want to know about the virtual education abroad fair, about the trivia night for international students, about all the stuff, if there's kind of a one-stop shop to get all that information, I think it would be helpful.
Okay, we have a question from Terry. I am not sure if many people are thinking about travel, not to mention travel abroad at this moment. How would you promote the different programs at the Education Abroad Fair in September when there are still so many uncertainties going on?
Certainly. I mean, one thing to know is our team is planning a year out, right? So our fair is usually not a big push for winter break or spring programs. I mean, it is intended for that as well. And as we mentioned, we are hopeful by summer we can run more programs than we've been able to run. So we still remain cautiously optimistic that we will eventually hit a new normal. It may not look exactly as it has we're anticipating 1,700 students abroad this year. However, we still want students to be thinking about international education and engaging with international communities in whatever way they can. And so the fair will continue with cautious optimism and also a lot of planning. You know, what you don't always understand is we're looking at every single program to say, what are the elements that make this relatively safer? Maybe what do we have to take out to run this in the future? What are the considerations that take to building the best, most meaningful program abroad, not just travel, but a real learning opportunity in this new environment. So so the fair will be going on. I just have to believe that this is not the end of our international engagement, and I'm glad my team is also proceeding that way. And like I say, unfortunately, we do plan a year out, and that gives us the opportunity to mitigate risks as well as to promote opportunities and keep that curiosity going. Next question.
Yeah, those are all the questions we have at the moment, but I'll open it.
Dan, I think we have one more. If I just take this one. Is it difficult, or Laura, if you want to address it, is it difficult or expensive for students to delay graduation in order to push their education abroad experience to a later semester? Could there be increased flexibility on that for seniors?
Yeah. This one gets a little tricky because in one part, we don't want students to delay the rest of their lives for an international experience. There's also considerations with when they could go, right? So if they're delaying to go in the spring, it may still be complicated in the spring. And I would hate to advise a student to say, push off your graduation for this. What one other consideration is for federal financial aid. If a student finishes all their degree requirements, they can't get more financial aid if they are finished with their degree. What we have done, not just in this semester, but in previous years, is when we have a graduating senior who really wants this experience, we can advise them about other ways to go abroad or have an international experience maybe after they've graduated. These wouldn't count in their degree credits, but it's still international learning and international engagement and all the great outcomes we hope that are different than travel, still really meaningful. But sometimes we can plant seeds to get them to think a little more creatively about other ways to go post-graduation. And that could be teaching abroad, applying for Fulbright grants, doing a graduate program abroad, working in other communities. So there's a lot of ways for them to continue to learn. It wouldn't look like the traditional study abroad experience, but even some of our study abroad partnerships will take students post-graduation, as long as students understand this is still meant to be academically rigorous. It's not, once again, it's not travel. It really is an educational experience. They will occasionally take students that have just graduated. So that's usually what we find.
That's true for semester at sea. We will take students who have just graduated. They have to take a full course load like everyone else. I think the downside is that they wouldn't be able to apply financial aid, right?
Just a quick note to everyone that I added a link to that section of our website to the chat for post-graduation opportunities. This is something that we're constantly trying to build out because we do have this conversation quite often with students, and it's so unfortunate to see the realities of the current situation impacting their planning, but gratefully there will be future opportunities for them to go abroad and maybe in a more professional or informal setting. So I've linked that in the chat.
And Ayelet, maybe you could you've got the great website resources related to all the virtual programming. Maybe you can put that in the chat as well. If you haven't seen it already, there's a lot going on. We have a full calendar of events. So as you're communicating with students, you can just attach those links and students can follow up as they have time. Any other questions or thoughts? All right. Well, I'll just say I really appreciate it. It makes me extremely happy to see so many people turning out for this. It's nice to know that, like I say, there's so much interest and so much support. As I said, it means the world to me. And it's nice to know there's so many other people thinking about what's happening next, as well as what the opportunities are for your students. You're welcome to message any of us following this if you have any questions or just want more resources. We're still working, we're still doing everything, and we're still looking at least a year ahead. And once again, always remaining optimistic that the world would be in a better place and that all of our international friendships will come out of this relatively okay, and not to minimize or not to simplify it, but just to be hopeful that we don't know what's going to happen on the other side, but I already see some good things happening, and I think more good is to come.
Laura, we've actually had one last question come in from Mickey Foxley. Post-graduation, do you recommend WOOF? I'm assuming that's pronounced WOOF. WWOOF.
I'm not sure if it's formally listed. Is it, Sarah?
I would just jump in and say, I don't know that it is. It may or may not be formally listed on our website, but woofing is an opportunity to work on organic farms internationally. And I think so much of post-grad advising comes down to the students' goals and what they're looking to get out of the experience. And so I don't know that we would formally endorse or not that specific program, but I do think it could be a great option depending on what a student is looking for in that experience.